You're a struggling single mum, barely making ends meet, working double shifts just to keep the lights on. Then, out of nowhere, you receive an email in the middle of the night offering you a job. But not just any job. It's a nanny position with a salary of $1 million a year. Sounds unbelievable, right? It feels like one of those scam emails that you instantly delete. But what if this one is real? That's exactly what happened to Sarah Mitchell, a small-town waitress trying to raise her 6-year-old daughter, Emma, after losing her husband 3 years ago. For Sarah, life hasn't been easy. She spends most days exhausted, serving tables, trying to juggle bills, and worrying about Emma's health, especially after a recent cough that just won't go away. But that night, something wakes her up. It's Emma's cough, echoing from the next room, pulling Sarah from her much-needed sleep. Out of habit, she checks her phone, and there it is, an email with a subject line that seems almost too good to be true. Immediate opening, private. Nanny position, $1,000 annual salary. Her first instinct is to delete it. But then she notices something strange. The email isn't from a random address. It's from Blackstone Industries, one of the biggest corporations in the country. And the message is from someone important, Victoria Hammond, the chief of staff to Alexander Blackstone. Even in her small town, that name rings a bell. Alexander Blackstone, the billionaire who vanished from public life 2 years ago after his wife's tragic death. Everyone knows the story. How his wife died in a car accident. How his daughter, Lily, was left physically and emotionally scarred, and how he retreated from the world. Hiding away in his sprawling estate, Sarah's mind races. Why would someone like Alexander Blackstone reach out to her, a simple waitress with no fancy qualifications? Sure, she's raised her own daughter, but $1 million job offer. It's absurd. And yet, something in her gut tells her not to. Ignore it. Maybe it's the promise of a life-changing opportunity. Or maybe it's the thought of all the bills piling up on her kitchen counter. Whatever it is, she decides to reply, just to see what happens. And that's when things start to get really strange. Within minutes of replying to the email, Sarah receives another message. This time, it's short and direct. Car arriving at your address in 30 minutes. Pack for an overnight stay. Her heart pounds as she stares at the screen. Is this real? Should she actually go through with it? Every part of her is screaming that this could be dangerous. Getting into a car with strangers in the dead of night. It sounds crazy, but at the same time, something about it feels right. Maybe it's desperation, or maybe it's hope. Either way, Sarah makes a decision. She's going. Quickly, she packs a small bag, just enough for an overnight stay. She leaves a note for her neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, just in case. Then she gently wakes Emma, who's still half asleep, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. Together, they step outside into the cool early morning air, waiting. Right on time, a sleek black car pulls up in front of their modest apartment. A woman steps out. It's Victoria Hammond herself. Dressed in an elegant suit, she looks exactly like her profile picture. And the fact that someone like her has shown up in person makes the situation feel even more real. Miss Mitchell, thank you for your prompt response, she says in a professional but kind tone. Is this Emma? Hello, sweetheart. Emma, still groggy, gives a shy wave, her little face peeking out from behind her rabbit. Sarah feels a strange mix of anxiety and curiosity as they climb into the car, and soon they're driving through winding country roads, heading toward the infamous Blackstone estate. Victoria explains a little more on the way. Lily Blackstone, the daughter Sarah would be caring for, has had a tough time since the accident. She's been through 7 nannies already, none lasting more than a few months. Sarah asks why, but Victoria is vague. The situation is complex, she says, her voice trailing off. As the car approaches a set of towering iron gates, Sarah's stomach flips. Beyond the gates is the Blackstone estate, grand, imposing, and surrounded by manicured gardens and heavy security. There are cameras everywhere, guards patrolling discreetly. The house itself is beautiful, a mix of classic architecture and modern touches. But there's something about the place that feels heavy, like it's weighed down by the secrets and sorrow that live within its walls. Inside, the house is surprisingly warm and lived in, despite its grandeur. Victoria leads Sarah and Emma to a cozy guest room, where Emma can continue sleeping. But Sarah is guided to a large playroom, filled with toys and books, and there, sitting quietly in the center, is Lily Blackstone. The first thing Sarah notices is Lily's long, dark hair, but then her eyes are drawn to the angry red scars covering the left side of the girl's face. A painful reminder of the accident that took her mother. Lily looks up at Sarah with a guarded expression, like she's expecting to be rejected, like she's been hurt too many times before. But something in Lily's eyes stirs a memory in Sarah. A familiar pain, a reflection of the loss she sees in her own mirror every day. Without hesitation, Sarah walks over and sits down beside her. "That's a beautiful album you're making," she says softly, glancing at the photos spread out in front of the girl. Lily studies Sarah's face for a long moment, searching for any hint of pity or disgust. But when she finds none, she slowly opens up, turning the album towards Sarah. "It's pictures of my mom," Lily whispers. "I'm afraid I'll forget what she looked like." Sarah's heart breaks a little more. She knows what it's like to hold on to memories of someone you've lost. "Your mom had a beautiful smile," she says gently, "just like yours." At that moment, neither of them knows that Alexander Blackstone is watching from his study, monitoring every word, every movement, his heart pounding as he witnesses the first real connection his daughter has had with anyone in years. But there's someone else watching too, someone far more dangerous. And she's not happy. Rebecca Sterling, Alexander's ex-fiancée, has been keeping a close eye on everything. And she's about to make her move. What happens next will change everything. As Sarah sat with Lily, she couldn't help but feel a growing bond with the little girl. It wasn't just about the scars or the pain they both carried. It was something deeper, an unspoken understanding between two people who had lost something they loved. In the quiet moments they shared, Sarah found herself forgetting the strangeness of the situation, the grandeur of the Blackstone estate, and the weight of the $1 million offer hanging over her head. For a brief moment, it felt like she was just a mom, sitting with another child who needed love. But the calm didn't last long. That night, after Sarah had put Emma to bed and was getting ready to turn in herself, she overheard voices from down the hall. She followed the sound, stopping just outside the study where the door was slightly ajar. Inside, she could hear Alexander Blackstone speaking in a low, tense voice. "I don't care what it costs. I want this dealt with. No more mistakes." Sarah's heart raced. She couldn't see who he was talking to, but it was clear something serious was going on. Maybe this wasn't just about finding a nanny for Lily. Maybe there was more at play, something darker. Sarah wasn't sure what she had gotten herself into, but one thing was certain. There were secrets here, and she had a feeling those secrets could put her and her daughter in danger. The next morning, things seemed normal. Victoria greeted Sarah with her usual polite smile and led her to the kitchen where breakfast was being served. Lily was already at the table, quietly picking at her food. Alexander, however, was nowhere to be seen. "Mr. Blackstone is busy today," Victoria explained. He has some important matters to attend to. Sarah nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Throughout the day, she tried to push the thoughts from her mind and focus on Lily, who was slowly warming up to her. They spent hours together, drawing, reading, and even going for a walk around their estate's sprawling gardens. Lily seemed happy, her guard dropping little by little, and Sarah felt a glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, she could make a difference in the girl's life. But the shadow of doubt loomed over everything. Later that afternoon, while Lily was resting, Sarah decided to explore the house a bit more. She wandered down one of the hallways she hadn't been through before and came across a large portrait of a woman hanging on the wall. It was Lily's mother, beautiful and elegant, with a warm smile that lit up the room. As Sarah stared at the painting, she couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. This was the woman who had left a hole in Lily's heart, and in Alexander's, too. Just as she was about to turn away, she heard footsteps behind her. Startled, she turned to see a woman standing at the end of the hall. It was Rebecca Sterling, Alexander's ex-fiancée. Sarah had seen her in photos before, but in person, she was even more striking. Tall, with piercing blue eyes, and a sharp, calculating expression, Rebecca gave Sarah a cold, appraising look. "You must be the new nanny," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Interesting choice." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. There was something about Rebecca that made her uneasy. "Yes, I'm Sarah," she replied, trying to keep her tone steady. "And you are?" "Rebecca," the woman said with a tight smile. "I used to be very close with Alexander. I know all about this place and the people in it. I just hope you're prepared for what you've gotten yourself into." Before Sarah could respond, Rebecca turned and walked away, leaving Sarah standing alone in the hallway, her heart pounding. It was clear Rebecca wasn't just some ex-fiancé who had moved on. There was bitterness in her voice, a lingering resentment that suggested she wasn't done with the Blackstone family. Over the next few days, things became even more tense. Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Every time she turned a corner, she half expected to see Rebecca lurking in the shadows. And Alexander's behavior became more erratic. He was often absent, buried in phone calls and meetings. But when he was around, he seemed distant, distracted, as if he was carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. One evening, after a particularly long day, Sarah was putting Emma to bed when Lily appeared at the door. She looked scared, her wide eyes filled with worry. "Can you stay with me tonight?" she asked softly. "I don't like being alone." Sarah's heart ached for the little girl, and she quickly agreed. After Emma fell asleep, she followed Lily to her room and sat with her until she drifted off. But just as Sarah was about to leave, she heard something that made her blood run cold. A whispered voice, faint but unmistakable, coming from the hallway. She crept to the door, her pulse quickening, and peeked out. There, standing just outside Lily's room, was Rebecca. She was speaking on the phone in a hushed tone, her back to Sarah. "We need to move faster," Rebecca whispered. "I don't care what he says. It's time to put the plan in motion." Sarah's heart raced. What plan? What was Rebecca talking about? She didn't know if she could trust Alexander, but she knew one thing for certain. Rebecca was up to something dangerous, and it involved Lily. That night, Sarah barely slept. Her mind was spinning with questions, with fear. She knew she couldn't keep ignoring the strange things happening around her. She had to figure out what was really going on before it was too late. But she also knew that getting involved could put her and Emma at risk. As the days passed, the tension in the house grew unbearable. Rebecca's presence became more frequent, and Alexander grew more distant, almost paranoid. Sarah could feel the walls closing in around her. the secrets of the Blackstone estate threatening to swallow her whole. And then, one fateful night, everything came to a head. A sudden storm hit, the winds howling outside as thunder crashed in the distance. Lily woke up screaming from a nightmare, and Sarah rushed to comfort her. But as she held the trembling girl in her arms, the door burst open. Alexander stood there, his face pale, his eyes filled with fear. "She's coming for Lily," he whispered. "We have to leave, now." The storm outside was nothing compared to the storm brewing inside the Blackstone estate, and Sarah knew they were running out of time. Sarah's heart pounded as Alexander's words echoed in her mind. The urgency in his voice left no room for questions. She grabbed Lily, who was still shaking from her nightmare, and followed Alexander down the long dark hallway of the estate. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, as if the storm itself was a warning. "Who's coming?" Sarah asked breathlessly, her arms wrapped protectively around Lily. She could barely keep up with Alexander's frantic pace, her mind racing. Rebecca! Was this her plan? Why was Lily in danger? "There's no time to explain everything," Alexander replied, his voice strained. "Just trust me. Rebecca, she's not who she says she is. She's been planning this for a long time. She wants to take Lily away, to control everything." Sarah's thoughts were a blur. As they reached the garage, Alexander grabbed a set of keys and threw open the door to one of the sleek black cars. Parked inside. "Get in, now." But before they could move, a figure appeared in the doorway behind them. It was Rebecca, her eyes gleaming with a cold determination. "You're not going anywhere," she said, her voice calm but dangerous. "You think you can just take her from me, Alexander? After everything I've done to secure my place here." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The pieces were finally coming together. Rebecca had been scheming, manipulating, biding her time, and now she was ready to take what she believed was hers, Lily, and everything that came with being tied to the Blackstone Empire. "You don't have to do this," Alexander said, his voice tight with anger. "This isn't about Lily. It's about your greed, your obsession with power. You can't use her as a pawn in your twisted game." Rebecca's smile faded, replaced by a look of fury. "You never understood, did you? You always thought I wanted you. But it was never about you, Alexander. It's about what Lily represents. Everything you've built, the legacy you've left behind. She's the key to all of it." As Rebecca stepped closer, Sarah instinctively moved in front of Lily, shielding her from Rebecca's gaze. The tension was unbearable, the storm outside growing louder with each passing second. For a moment, it seemed like everything would unravel right there, in the middle of the garage. But then, in a flash of desperation, Sarah spoke up. "Rebecca, this isn't the answer. Whatever you think you're going to gain from this, it won't be worth it. Lily is just a child. She doesn't deserve to be caught in the middle of your fight." Rebecca's eyes flickered, just for a moment, as if Sarah's words had struck a chord. But her resolve quickly hardened again. "You don't understand. I've come too far to turn back now." The tension in the air was thick, the storm outside raging like a reflection of the chaos unfolding inside. But then, just as Rebecca took another step forward, a voice echoed from behind her. "Stop!" It was Victoria, the housekeeper, standing in the doorway with a phone in her hand. "I've called the police. They're on their way. It's over, Rebecca." Rebecca's face twisted with fury. But there was no escape. The sound of sirens in the distance confirmed that the authorities were closing in. She had lost, and she knew it. With one final bitter glance at Alexander and Sarah, Rebecca turned and disappeared into the stormy night. In the aftermath, the house fell eerily silent. The weight of everything that had just happened hung in the air like a thick fog. Alexander stood by the car, visibly shaken, while Sarah held Lily close, her heart still racing. Later that night, after the police had taken Rebecca into custody, Sarah and Alexander sat together in the quiet living room, Lily fast asleep upstairs. The storm had passed, leaving only the soft patter of rain against the windows. "I'm sorry," Alexander said quietly, his eyes filled with regret. "I should have told you everything sooner. I thought I could protect Lily on my own, but I didn't realize how far Rebecca was willing to go." Sarah nodded, understanding the weight of his words. "You did what you thought was best," she replied gently. "But Lily deserves more than just protection. She deserves a family. People who love her, not because of what she represents, but because of who she is." Alexander looked at her, his expression softening. "You've been that for her, Sarah, more than anyone else ever could." The words hung in the air, and for the first time since she'd stepped into the Blackstone estate, Sarah felt a sense of peace. Despite everything that had happened, there was a future here. One where Lily could heal, where she could grow up surrounded by love and care. As the days turned into weeks, things began to settle. Rebecca was no longer a threat, and Alexander worked to rebuild the life he wanted for Lily, a life that included Sarah and Emma. The bond between them all grew stronger, not just as nanny and employer, but as a family. In the end, Sarah realized that the $1 million offer had never really been about money. It had been about something much deeper: trust, connection, and the chance to make a difference in a little girl's life. And in accepting the role, Sarah had found something priceless: a new beginning for both her and Lily. As she watched Lily and Emma play together in the garden one sunny afternoon, laughter filling the air, Sarah knew that despite all the challenges, she had made the right choice. She had found her place, and in the end, that was worth more than any offer money could ever buy.